Welcome to Totally Talent Podcast by HR.com, your go-to source for all things talent. Whether you're looking for expert insights on high-volume hiring, the latest trends in recruitment technology, or strategies for building a winning team, we've got you covered. Join us for each episode as we dive deep into the challenges and opportunities shaping the talent landscape today. Let's get started.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Totally Talent from HR.com. My name is Mike Wood. I am your host, and we got a special data episode for you today. We are talking to Jodie Cherry Roth of Recruitics. I wouldn't say I've long followed you, but definitely since I've been at HR.com, I've noticed a lot of the stuff that you've been writing is fantastic. She's my go-to for looking at what's happening in the labor market. So welcome, Jodie. If you just want to introduce yourself to our listeners, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for our conversation today. My name is Jodie. Like he said, I am a senior director of consulting with Recruitics. I've been with Recruitics for about 4 years now, and this is a newer role for me that I'm currently in, and I'm just absolutely loving it. It's so fun to get paid to know what's going on and learn the latest and greatest, and then get to share that and teach others about it. So I'm having a blast in this new job.
I feel like you and your team are so I'm from the Boston area, so I know the whole Perfect Storm story and movie and stuff. But there's a scene in there where the guy's like, he's looking at all the data and he's like, oh my God. And I feel like that's what you guys are doing with what's happening in the market right now.
Honestly, like, I think that's why, so many companies come to us and want us to help them, right? Because it's like, there's so much going on. It's like, how do you make sense of it all? Um, and people don't have the time. People are really busy at work already. So it's like, okay, how can we make this more efficient? Well, we're out there kind of doing all the research, doing all the reading, trying to kind of decipher and, figure out what's important and what's not, and then share that back in a way that's digestible, action oriented, so that clients kind of know what to do with all of the data. So, we've certainly found that that's a value proposition that we're bringing to people right now when there's tornadoes worth of data out there.
Just to pick a recent natural disaster. So yeah, let's dive a little bit about into your background to kind of set the stage a
Yeah.
little bit. So how did you get into all this?
Yeah, actually, I started out as a recruiter, and I loved recruiting. But I quickly turned recruiter to recruitment marketing, and I was able to start my career actually at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis. Um, and I probably would have stayed there forever if I could have, because I still think that place is the best place in the world to work. But I really needed the flexibility to work remotely, and at that time, remote work was not really a thing. That was way pre-COVID. We're talking 2012. And so I transitioned to Ascension Health and worked for them for 5 years. So stayed on the Catholic healthcare train. Moved to Nashville, worked for Ascension, and I had the privilege there of really being a part of the team that brought all of recruitment marketing back in house. And so over the course of the 5 years, I bopped around between basically every area of recruitment marketing that there is, and had a blast. And then, I kind of thought, what would it be like to go work for an agency? I really wanted exposure to other industries. I felt like I, could say I was an expert in healthcare, but really wanted to kind of tap my toes into other sectors. So I've been at the agency now for 4 years, and it's been a really great experience getting to kind of see recruitment marketing played out across all different sectors, all different types of clients.
Yeah, I love that you're able to really dive into the data. And so like I'm thrilled to have you on the show because I've been writing and talking a lot about like what's happening, trying to figure out what's happening in the market, what we're hearing from
Yeah.
the administration and what we're actually seeing in the numbers. I don't think we're really getting a full picture because there seems to be some sort of like a white collar recession or underemployment crisis from what I'm seeing. And it's just like you have to dive into the data a little bit more. So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited about to embrace my inner data nerd. I'm going to put on my glasses so I can see things. So let's look into the data. Let me just pull up some of the recent figures that you shared with me. and our readers should be, or listeners should be able to see it. So this
Yeah.
is the U.S. labor market. What's going on?
Yeah. This, what we're taking a look at here is the total number of job openings compared to the number of people who are unemployed. And you can see that those numbers have gradually been moving closer and closer back together. So we're basically now at a state where it's, around one job opening for every one person that's unemployed. So if you're looking at it from this lens, it looks like, okay, well, we're totally back in balance, right? Like the labor market is back in balance where it needs to be. But really, if you kind of dive in a little bit deeper, you can see that it's not really like that, especially when you kind of think about blue collar versus white collar jobs. A lot of people are referring to that now as more of like stand up versus sit down jobs. And as you start to zoom in, we can see a little bit of a different story when it comes to supply and demand for those two sectors.
Yeah, so
Um,
here's the white collar versus blue collar look.
Yeah, this is from Avelio Labs. They're one of the data sources that we often go to that kind of helps us to tell the story of what's going on. And this is looking at Q1 of this year compared to Q1 of last year. You can see just in this quarter alone that there's been a greater dip in what they're calling white collar jobs or those sit down desk jobs compared to blue collar. It really has varied a little bit based off of sector. So we're seeing this heavily for tech jobs. I don't know if you saw the news this morning, but Walmart's in the headlines actually for 1,500 tech layoffs just this morning. Um, and we also see it in other roles that are sit down, like marketing, like what we're in, or analyst type positions. And I think when you think about like, what's going on federally, right, that may be impacting some of this as well. Roles that are research oriented, roles that are in consulting, those are the two roles that have been hit the hardest when it comes to, federal budget cuts that we're seeing. So sharp declines for those two job categories in the last couple of months.
And I want to get into this chart that Employee actually put out the other day. Give me your thoughts on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, this is so interesting. So I was actually shocked to see how pronounced this was. So Employee put out a job seeker report. I think it just published last week, and they asked job seekers, what do you feel like we're in a white collar recession? Like, what's the vibe? And almost everybody, you can see 53% said agree, 29% said strongly agree that we are, in a white collar recession. And this is pretty telling that percentage of people, sort of feel that way. And I think kind of along with this feeling, I think there's also some feelings of, resentment that are happening amongst white collar workers as well. We're seeing more and more companies kind of force people back, to come back into office with RTO plans, and a lot of people don't like that and have really enjoyed the flexibility that they have had over the last couple of years. And I would also say that wages for white collar workers have been pretty stagnant and have not really been growing. Blue collar wages have been growing at a little bit faster pace, which is needed because we need workers in the blue collar space. But I think those two things can kind of be causing a little bit of resentment for the white collar workers.
I always assumed that it was going to be the robots that took manufacturing jobs and, the heavy lifting type of thing. That's what we were sold essentially, is that we're going to have robots delivering our packages. We'll have, drones even delivering our packages. So, nope. The robots came for the marketing managers of the world. They came for, middle management. And it's really strange that, you know, there are corporations out there that think that they can just automate the hell out of their marketing and sales.
Mhm.
But yet you can't automate the blue collar stuff. You need an actual person just there on the ground. So I'm hoping that there's some sort of pushback against the glee, I want to say, of some corporations to just get rid of most of their workforce and just rely on
Yeah.
AI. But what are we seeing in the recruiter space? You had a good chart. Here it is. Oh
Yeah.
no, this is
One thing that I kind of like to keep an eye on just in general is what's going on with recruiter job volume, right? Because if recruiter job volume is growing, then that means that people are hiring. And so if we look at this chart again is from Revelio, and if we look at the percentage growth month over month, we can see that recruiter jobs actually did increase last month compared to the month prior, up 1.7%. So to me, this is a good sign. This means that companies are still hiring. And I know you mentioned, AI and robots taking over. I think, it's important when we think about the recruiter role to consider that, I strongly feel that in 2 years from now, the recruiter role is going to look very different. It is rapidly changing. And I think the role is going to be becoming more and more a person that is managing data and can analyze things. And then I think also that, and this is, I think this is kind of hard to even like wrap our mind around, right? But like right now, recruiters are using all of these different AI, agents and different tools, right? Like you may be using AI support within LinkedIn, or maybe you're using it in, Indeed sourcing, whatever it is. Well, I think that the future of the recruiter role is that all of those agents are going to be talking to each other. So you're going to be moving from like working with an agency over here versus over there to managing a team of agents that are really working in concert with each other. So, the recruiter of the future is not just going to be competing with other recruiters. They're going to be competing with recruiters that know how to effectively manage those AI teams. So could probably talk about this topic all day, but I won't go. I won't go on and on. This could be a whole separate podcast. But certainly there's a lot to uncover when it comes to what the recruiter role is going to look like over the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at. I love that you included this on consumer sentiment, and
Yeah.
what's not only just in the job space, but just in spending in general. If you want to talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think consumer sentiment is interesting to look at because it really helps us understand what behavior is going to be. When sentiment hits record lows, as you can see here, they've been tracking this since the 70s, and this last month it just hit the second lowest level ever recorded in that 50-year period of time. And so when sentiment goes down, really consumers, I think, start to really shift to more value-based purchases. They start to really look at their wallet. How am I spending my money? And so I think how this kind of can tie into hiring is, you may see companies that really have, offer a lot of value for what you're getting, start to really see upticks in hiring plans. So, last week, McDonald's announced a huge hiring spree coming up. And that's just one example of, your money will go a little bit further there, right, than it would a sit down restaurant. And so people are starting to have to kind of make those choices. And then you see it reflected in hiring because the demand for workers in that area goes up. So that's kind of just one example of how consumer sentiment and watching that can really kind of, help you forecast what demand's going to look like for certain sectors.
Yeah. So you're a mom with a little kid. I'm a dad with a little kid. We've obviously gone to McDonald's. It's an easy way to just feed the kids. Happy Meal, I think in Massachusetts, without the app, it's like $6, but with the app, it's $4. But like, I love looking at just basic like necessities as a kind of barometer for what's really going on. So like McDonald's, as you know, they try to put AI into everything. There, you go in there and like you can do the kiosk ordering and whatnot, but it's not as good.
Yeah.
And then as for what I'm getting for my money, for example, like if I'm going to spend mid-level restaurant money for taking wife and 2 kids out to like Applebee's, let's just use Applebee's as an example, I think it's like $70 or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it, you're like, what am I eating? Like, what is this? Like, for that $70, I could make how many meals at home that are actually better quality than a lot of this stuff. So I think there's this like backlash of being like, what are we actually spending on? And
Yeah.
as quality dips. But let's talk a little bit about the immediate future and the summer. So
Yeah.
like, say you're graduating this spring, you're all excited to hit the ground running, build your career. How's the summer looking for you?
Yeah. I would probably honestly tell students if their parents are still helping them and money's not a barrier, I'd probably say go to grad school, to be honest. But if you're not, and that's not your circumstance, I think there's several factors at play here. The first is that internship posting volumes have gone down. This chart's from Indeed. The pink line is looking at 2025 numbers, and you can see it started to kind of dip below what we saw in 2019. This is an important part of the conversation because internships are such a key entry point, right, for students to be able to learn and kind of dip their toes into the sector. So that's the first thing that I think we have to think about heading into the summer. The second piece of the puzzle, I think we have a chart for this as well, is that, applications are really surging when, we look at folks that are working at agencies that have been under DOGE review. So up 50% in the month of February. And, what this tells me here is that the competition for job seekers is just, rising and is really high because you've got all these new, very experienced people who are kind of flooding the job market. And then, I know we've talked a little bit about this, but, I think AI is starting to replace some of that entry level workforce. To me, this one is pretty concerning, right? Because it's like, if AI is replacing those roles, how are these folks that are just entering the labor market ever going to learn the foundational things they need to know to do their job? I mean, you got to kind of have enough of a foundational knowledge to even know how to use the AI chatbot or whatever AI tool it is, in the first place. So that one I think is a little concerning. And then, the other thing I think we have to keep an eye on is unemployment. And unemployment so far has been pretty flat, right? Like if you look at it from a macro perspective, but if you start to kind of dive in and you're looking at, well, how long are people unemployed? That length of time that people are unemployed for longer periods of time, it's really starting to increase. And so it just means that job seekers are having a tougher time finding a job, and they're in the market for a new job for longer periods of time. So, it's taking on average right now between 5 and 6 months or for folks to find a job. That may be longer in some cases for some jobs, but it also is, for those blue collar workers, it's a lot shorter, right? So we're talking again about more of that white collar worker where it's taken that long to find a job.
So, you know that I can't help myself. This is the dad pun in me, but it looks like it's shipping up to be a cruel summer. Really dated reference. But Jodie, is there any good news for students or people looking for work in one of the worst job markets we've seen?
Yeah. Well, for me, Taylor Swift is never a dated reference. Especially this week. I don't know if you saw, but she announced her "Look What You Made Me Do" Taylor's version on *Handmaid's Tale* earlier this week. So she is definitely part of the conversation line this week. But yeah, I think there's a couple of it's not all doom and gloom, right? Like there are some things that are happening right now that are a little helpful for job seekers. I think the first thing that we can see here is that foreign interest in jobs in America has gone down, in the last couple of months. Maybe this is because of immigration reform, maybe just the vibe out there right now in the U.S., but not as many people from abroad are looking for jobs in the U.S. The other thing is there are more people in the U.S. who are looking for jobs elsewhere, right? So we've seen an uptick in people who are looking for jobs in Canada and Mexico. Those are sort of the two primary countries. So that helps a little bit on the supply side. And then the other thing, this is probably my favorite chart of the day, honestly, because this is so shocking to me. We're looking here at what I think is active job seeker intent, right? So these are people on Indeed that have either added their resume or updated their resume over the last month. And I would have thought in January with New Year hiring, you would have saw that number bop up, but you didn't. You saw it go down. And then look at February, only 1.7 million people across the U.S. Took action to add or update their resume. Obviously that's a little bit shorter of a month, which may have impacted that. But I think also, what else happened in February, right? February 1st was when the tariff talk really started to kind of tick up. And so, I think that some of that instability and uncertainty that comes with the tariff conversation is also influencing this. But this to me is very dramatic. We're no longer in the Great Resignation. Like we're really seeing like stagnation when it comes to workers that are currently employed who are looking for other work.
And all that tariff talk, back in February. So now we're starting to see the first ships that come in with less goods. We're seeing the first price upticks from Walmart and Target. But I feel like even back in February, it handcuffed everybody to any plan that you had for the year. It, the administration just threw a wrench into it because you can't plan anything, you
Yeah.
can't do anything, so you can't plan the hiring that you want. If all of a sudden your cost of goods are going to be, I don't know, what was it, 400% more or 145% more or something like that, something insane. But
Absolutely.
and I've just seen that everybody's been on this pause, and it probably mirrors what happened with COVID when that started rolling around in Q1 of 2020. Is that people were like,
Yeah.
wait a second, I can't move until I get more information about what's actually happening. So
Yeah.
I just, yeah, I try not to be the sky is falling all the time, but we are seeing some things that are concerning. Um, but you shared with me this chart about the employee motivation and commitment index,
Yeah.
and so like, how did you find this, and like, why do you look at this?
Yeah. ADP is a great source of data. They have a whole research division that puts out a lot of really great content. This is a slide that actually came out this week. And the reason I thought it was important to talk about is because uh, this month actually hit the highest number of commitment that we've seen since they started tracking this. And I really think that what the data here is showing us is that people are hanging on to the jobs that they currently have for their dear life, right? Even if they're not happy. So I think we've got a lot of people who are not necessarily happy in their roles, but they are staying, they are committed to their work because they can see how hard it is to find work somewhere else, is what I think this really shows us.
Yeah, and they also put out this report on boomerang hires, which I was really surprised to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is interesting. We can really see here that 2025 numbers, boomerangs are starting to kind of make a little bit of a comeback. What this is telling us is that 35% of the hires made in the month or in 2025 so far have been boomerang talent. This number is honestly, I was a little shocked to see how high this number is. Um, I think that this really kind of should indicate to companies that if you don't have your former workers segmented separately in your CRM, you really need to, because you can see the percentage of hires that are coming from this source. So making sure that you've got some segmentation put in place so you can start to marketing to these folks, I think is something that companies should really be looking at right now.
Yeah, what this really spoke to me was that it's so hard to hire right now in terms of the just amount of resumes and the amount of people that you're trying to vet and the amount of people that you're trying to get to a point where you can trust that they're the person that they say they are. And so,
Yeah.
someone that you've already hired, that you've already worked with, you've already, had on your staff, you can skip all that. It's almost like a referral. So I just was like, okay, maybe other people are getting a little bit frustrated from just, sitting on LinkedIn all day or going through Indeed and trying
Yeah.
to screen all these candidates and then finding out that they just used AI to, to get through the process. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting, and it's one of those. I mean, I've heard it somewhere in my career. I can't remember when, but someone had told me if you leave a company, don't go back. I was like, really? But I guess some people go back.
Yeah. Well,
uh,
35%, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that people just want security, right? It's like when everything around you is kind of feels out of control and there's a lot of uncertainty, it's kind of going back to what you know, it's going back to maybe what's familiar. I mean, to me, that seems like a very natural step for people. And so, and on the company side, I think that boomerangs can really kind of cut through all that chaos. If you know somebody has worked for you before and they were a high performer and they're eligible for rehire, you want to rehire them again, like it might be the safest and fastest way to kind of get to your new hire. So yeah, I think that this is important for both the job seeker to consider and also companies to look at as well.
yeah. It's also like just the overall worker sentiment over the past couple of years. I think that we've seen when there are these big economic downturns or whatever, that the companies that say that oh, we're family and we take care of each other, no, they will drop you at the without a second thought. And so I think there is this kind of like realization with employees that, wait a second, that I got to look out for me. I got to make sure that
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm not going to trust that this company is going to take care of me they will, not especially when you're seeing everybody in your feeds or people everybody's worried that they're going to be next on the chopping block. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you have a great employee that you can go back to, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so where have you seen have you seen any other examples of, the worker sentiment like through Glassdoor or anything like that?
Yeah, I think ultimately, I wanted to include this next chart because it's, employee confidence is dropping to near record lows. So Glassdoor has been tracking this for a while now. You can see where it currently sits. And I did take a look at, where within sentiment are we seeing the greatest declines? And really, it's if you look year over year at Business Outlook, willingness to recommend your company to your friend, CEO approval, we're all seeing these numbers really come down. So, from my perspective, now more than ever is a time that you really need to be monitoring sentiment. You need to be looking at your reputation and what's happening, because that can kind of forecast out for you too, like what's about to happen. If you have an employee that goes on and leaves you a negative score, they are 60% more likely is what Glassdoor is saying, that they're going to be applying for jobs immediately following leaving that review. So it can kind of help you forecast out what's going to happen. And we've seen a lot of companies really start to invest in this more this year. We recently rolled out a tool that kind of helps you aggregate all of your sentiment in one spot that a lot of people are finding value in, because there's just kind of so much of it everywhere. But I think it's really important for companies to kind of be looking at this now more than ever before. Yeah, and on the job seeker front, so ZipRecruiter puts out a quarterly report that looks at job seeker sentiment. If we were to have this conversation 2 weeks ago and you were to ask me, I would not have amazing news to report, because Q1 numbers looked really terrible. They kind of tanked. Q2, we did see some upticks overall in job seeker confidence, which I think is encouraging. We see that men are way more confident in themselves than women when it comes to job seekers. Interestingly, if you look at party lines, so red versus blue states, confidence went up in both. But one thing that I wanted to call out, which is what's highlighted here, is that sentiment and confidence amongst the early workers, 18 to 24, right? Those that are about to be graduating, really kind of tanked this last quarter. And so, this kind of shows you that their confidence, their overall sentiment as it relates to, being a job seeker is really declining.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame them with everything that's happening. I mean,
Yeah.
so there is, there's a tariff pause heading into the summer.
Yeah.
So that should ease things a little bit. But I'm wondering, so I could look at, I don't know why, there's something about me, I could look at this chart all day and find different pieces of it that I like. But have you seen any variation by sector of,
Oh, for sure.
what?
Yeah. Yeah. Tariffs. Yeah, I'm glad there's a 90-day pause. I think August maybe 1st is when it kind of, comes back at play. But I think the impacts of tariffs really vary by sector. So for retail, as an example, kind of as companies are heading into planning for their seasonal hiring, I think we're seeing, at least from our clients' perspective, maybe a little delay, a little bit more pause as they're planning, that wait and see mentality. I think with leisure and hospitality, we're really projecting less travelers here this year spending money, right? So as of right now, that's been pretty flatline, but I do think there's going to be a tariff impact on that sector as fewer people travel here, which means less demand for the workers. I think healthcare should be pretty stable, right? Like healthcare has been the shining star the last couple of years in terms of job gains. And I think tech will be fairly stable when it comes to AI, right? Like that, type of job is really kind of dominating that sector. So really, a lot of variance amongst sectors. And then I wanted to include this chart because our clients have been asking us, what does this mean? Like what's going to happen? Or like, what should I be thinking about? And I included 5 things here. There's probably a lot more things we need to be thinking about on this topic, but what I see are the 5 biggest things are, we're seeing shifts in location strategy. So companies are, committing to manufacturing investments, here in the US, right? Which is great in a couple of years from now. Not really going to see much traction on that, maybe this year. We're seeing slower hiring in tariff sensitive sectors. So this, sectors that are going to be influenced heavily by tariffs may kind of slow down their hiring initiatives. We're seeing companies really pivot their focus and attention on those high ROI roles. So again, those AI positions, positions that are bringing in money for the company. Compensation constraints is another thing. Companies are kind of struggling to really justify to their leaders, let's give everyone raises when there's so much uncertainty with tariff policy. And then I think the last thing that we've talked about a little bit here is just, reputational risk from layoffs, right? Like if your company goes through a round of layoffs, you're almost certainly going to have some dings to your reputation after that. And so, that's something that we've got to kind of keep our eye on as we're in this like really uncertain time.
I love the compensation part because, for years I've been at companies that are like, okay, you had a great year. Here's a 1% raise. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And as I got older, like at first I'm like, okay, 1% of my whole salary. Wow. But then I got older. I'm like, wait a second. Inflation was 3% or inflation was 5% or something like that. So now I'm actually making less money. And,
Yeah.
this 1%, what is it, like $5 a week or something? It's just nothing. So it just like,
Yeah.
it just, everybody's getting squeezed. Everybody. So,
Yeah.
let's look at the rest of the year. So what do you see happening kind of like for the rest of the year? And of course, all these predictions are going to be wrong because something will happen over the summer. But let's just
I know.
go through the exercise.
Yeah, I actually put out an article last October that was looking at predictions for 2025. And I have been
Well,
wrong
you got
about
them all right, right?
for sure, 2 of the 10 have been incorrect predictions. But I would say I feel pretty confident about this first thing, which is that companies are aggressively trying to figure out how to use AI, when to use AI, where to use AI, and ultimately, like what elements of AI should be human. And I think that we really are going to be transitioning our thinking to be less about like, oh, this little AI tool to more of, AI is part of the team, right? Like, and so I think that people are really just trying to figure out what to do. I think I have a slide in here, maybe the next slide that kind of shows what percentage of jobs are actually going to change from AI. And, Salesforce recently put out a survey, and CHROs are predicting a 327%, increase in the usage of this in the next 2 years. And so you're looking at like 1/4 of the workforce having completely different jobs, in the next few years. So I think this topic of AI is going to be here. We're going to continue to talk about it. I think that the other things, TA leaders need to be closer to their hiring managers now than ever, right? Like we're seeing shifting strategies, wait and see, pause, dial up here. Like you really need a seat at the table to understand what's going on, be able to provide data to your hiring managers to make smart decisions. I think that companies will continue to really prioritize retention over hiring externally. So again, like that need to kind of keep an eye on your sentiment and reputation as that kind of can forecast out for you what's going to happen. And then lastly, something we haven't talked about today, but that is really dominating, I think, our space when it comes to talent is quality. How do you solve for quality and how do you do that and balance candidate expectations at the same time? And I'll tell you that the system overall right now feels pretty broken. And I don't think that we're making enough progress in this space. And so I think that's going to continue to be, something that's top of mind for our sector in this year.
So I have a hot take and a prediction, which I hope doesn't come true, but I feel like this kind of like where they're putting in the human into, business processes. I feel like there are going to be some companies out there that put human interaction as a premium. So let's
As a
think of like
yeah.
as a premium, they'll sell it. So
Mhm.
what they'll do is AI will do the basic, customer service, for example. Um, but it can be maddening. So if you actually want to just, do a fast pass to an actual person that can solve your problem, pay an extra $30 a month or something like that. I hope that doesn't happen, but I could totally see it happening.
You're probably right about that. And kind of along those lines, like a prediction I have, or something that I think someone smarter than me should try to figure out, is like, how do you start to track, like, what job seekers are saying about their AI experience on places like TikTok, where I don't know if you've seen any of these videos, but it's so heartbreaking when people are recording their interview, which is questionable at best in the first place. But like, they've got their phone up recording, and then, all of a sudden you see their face drop when they realize that the person that they're interviewing with is not a real person. It's an AI bot, right? And so, like, how that's like dragging down uh, you know, reputation of these companies who are inserting AI into the wrong places in the process. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. This topic is going to be really
Yeah,
interesting to look
I
at.
think, well, so
Yeah.
I follow Recruiting Hell on Reddit, which is a great thread about all the horrible things people have to deal with recruiting. And the candidate experience thing, there has to be someone out there with psychology background or something that will look at this someday. Because just from, I mean, I was laid off last summer. I'm now at HR.com, which is great. But I was laid off last summer, and it is horrible out there right now. You go on LinkedIn, you think you have all the skills and whatever, and you go to apply for a job, and 1,000 people have already applied.
Yeah.
So it's, I can see why they would put that on the job posting for the job posters themselves, being like, look at all the traffic we're getting you. But from the candidate perspective, are you going to apply for a job that 1,000 people applied for? Probably
Yeah.
not. Is it worth your time?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're doing everything right, and you get to a company that you're interested in, and they're not going to even invest to talk to you as a real person, what does that tell you? So it just,
Yeah.
we'll see. I think there'll be some sort of backlash at some point where candidates will be like, "This is, you can't. I don't want to just talk to a robot." It's like,
Right.
so I'm going to write about this in the wrap, the newsletter that I put out every Friday. And if it reminds me of, now I'm probably too old, but do you remember Movie Phone?
No.
Okay, so Movie Phone. So I'm going to be 43 in a couple weeks. So when I was a kid, you would have to look up the newspaper to see what time movies were playing. And then this new service came out called Movie Phone, where it was this all touch tone customer service style thing where you go through it, read all the different types of movies that were playing, what times were, and you'd sit there forever. And at some point, you'd just be like, well, why don't I just tell somebody the name of the movie? Like the Kramer said it in Seinfeld. He's like, well, why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you wanted? And I feel like that's what's going to happen. Is that, we're making the same mistakes that we made in the customer service area where everything was touch tone. And then you see people don't like it. They'll go on Twitter and they'll find your company and they'll put them on blast, or they'll find a different way to get in touch with a real person. How many times when you call, I see it with my doctor's office where I'm just like smashing the operator button to just get me through to somebody so I can make an appointment instead
Yeah.
of all the different directories. So I feel like there's going to be some backlash at some point where people will stand up and be like, this is ridiculous. But who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're seeing some of it play out with like AI legislation that's going on when it comes to, discrimination or, practices related to AI. But I think in general, companies right now are just trying to figure it out, right? So sometimes it's like, if you look at the pendulum, it's like swinged way too far over here, right? And it'll take some time and people will kind of come back to center. But I think right now in this discovery phase where companies are just trying to throw paint at the wall to like figure out, okay, what should we be doing? I think in some cases we're seeing some companies take it a little bit too far to one side. And I think eventually, they're going to come back to the center, hopefully for the job seekers sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, when you and I are working side by side in the factories with our families, we could say we were right. We saw this coming.
Oh
Anyway,
gosh.
this is great. I love having you on here. If people want to follow more of your writing and all the
Yeah.
great stuff you're doing for Recruitics, and I implore the audience to please like follow because it's really interesting stuff. Where can they find
Yeah. I'm posting most of my long form content now on my LinkedIn. So, if you've found anything that we said today interesting, feel free to follow along on my LinkedIn or shoot me a direct message as well if you're, interested in learning more. We also have a strategic consulting page on our Recruitics website that you can check out, if you're interested in learning more. And I think ultimately, like, I think two different types of scenarios are finding the most value in what we're doing, right? It's the companies that don't have the full-time headcount or teams dedicated to market intelligence. Maybe they can't afford it. We see them partnering with us because it's cheaper if you, kind of hire an agency to kind of help you do that if you can't afford a full-time person. And then I think the other thing is that you've got those teams that have so much data out there that they don't know what to do with it, right? So, and they don't have time. So, we've really been able to kind of help teams that are trying to just decipher all the data that's out there and kind of put it into something actionable. I think that's another key piece of value that we can bring for companies. So definitely feel free to reach out. Would love to connect with you to learn more.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jodie. So she's Jodie Cherry Roth. She's on LinkedIn. You can follow her there. You can look at the stuff on Recruitics. I'm going to share it on the Wrap and other places. And we'll definitely have you on again so we can look at some of these predictions over the summer and say,
Yeah.
what is actually happening now? Because things were
Yeah.
bad then, but are they going to get worse? Are they going to get better?
Yeah.
Who
See
knows?
if we were right or wrong.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You
And
too.
thank you
Take
all
care.
for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to the Totally Talent podcast by HR.com. We hope you find today's episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to explore more episodes and discover valuable resources at hr.com/podcasts, where you can listen to all of our podcasts. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and making a difference in the world of talent.